Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something pretty fundamental, uh, really aiming at one of the biggest assumptions in how we think about, well, everything. Cosmology, biology, the nature of space and life itself.
Yeah, for centuries, the standard picture has been, life as this sort of fragile thing that just happened to pop up inside this huge, mostly empty universe.
Right. Delicate, rare, probably an accident almost, against the odds.
Exactly. But what if? What if that's completely backwards?
And that inverted view is exactly what's in the material you brought us today. We're doing a really comprehensive deep dive into something called the Unified Coherence Theory, UCT. It's from Philip Lillian back in 2025.
And it's not just another model, is it? It's framed as a total ontological shift, a complete flip. We're moving from the idea of the universe containing life
To the universe actually being generated by life's basic principle, which this theory calls coherence.
coherence, right, that's the key word. The sources we have are, well, they're dense, straight from Lillian's original work. They detail the geometry, the linguistic architecture of what he calls the Panspacial Finsler coherence hyperfractal phase space.
Okay, that's definitely a mouthful. Let's call it FCHP for short, maybe.
Yeah, FCHP sounds good, but that whole long name points to what it is, this proposed deep language of existence, the underlying code, the grammar that supposedly dictates reality itself.
So our mission here isn't just to give you the highlights. We really want to unpack the deep detail behind this geometric structure. UCT basically says that coherence, this organized, unified flow of information and energy, is the prime force.
The generator.
Yeah.
Giving rise to space, time, form, even consciousness eventually.
And the specific points we pulled out are, well, they're challenging. They push back hard on standard models. We're talking about a framework where space isn't fundamental, it just emerges.
Emerge in space, yeah.
Where the universe actually have a kind of grammar and syntax you can figure out. And maybe the wildest part, that the spiral in your DNA, how your neurons fire together and how a whole galaxy rotates, they share the exact same underlying mathematical relationship. Something UCT calls resonance isomorphism.
It's a lot to take in. So let's start with the geometry, maybe. That seems foundational.
Sounds good. Let's unpack this FCHP framework first.
Okay.
Okay, section 1. Let's hit the most radical bit first. Panspatiality. We're all taught, space is the box, the container, the grid where things happen. UCT says, nope.
Yeah, that's the fundamental break. It really throws out the container idea. Panspatiality means this. This coherence field isn't just in space. It is space, and it's everywhere, pervading all possible dimensions. Lillian calls this the hyperfractal manifold.
A hyperfractal manifold.
Okay.
So space isn't static, it's emerging.
Yeah.
A projection.
Exactly. A continuous dynamic projection.
Yeah.
So when you look out at the universe, you're not seeing stuff in a big empty box. You're seeing the kind of 3D output of deeper coherence relationships playing out.
That feels fundamentally alive as a concept for reality itself.
It is. Think less passive theater, more like a self-organizing plasma, maybe. This FCHP thing, it integrates potential, dimensions, even intelligence, apparently, into one fluid structure. Space just emerges where the coherence gradients are strong.
So strong coherence means stable space.
Basically, yeah, where coherence density is high and the relationships are stable, that's where we perceive, our familiar space-time.
Okay, but that's a big challenge to something like general relativity, right? GR assumes space-time is this sort of smooth underlying thing. If space emerges from coherence gradients, does UCT predict anything different, say about gravity or the universe's shape?
It does, actually, especially around things like gravitational anomalies. If space is a projection of coherence, then gravity isn't just the curvature of a passive sheet. It's more like the tension created when coherence folds in on itself.
Tension in the coherence field.
Right. So UCT suggests phenomena like, say, dark matter effects might not be hidden mass. They could be non-local coherence patterns. Structures in that deeper hyperfractal manifold creating localized coherence gradients, and that's what we measure as extra gravity.
Wow. Okay, so it connects cosmic structure directly to life's possibility.
That's the link. The geometry of the cosmos is tied directly to the capacity for coherence, which is the basis for life.
And the sources are really clear on that. They say the field's ability to be coherent is what makes life possible. Every cell, every organism, it's described as a localized linguistic expression, like a word spoken by this panspatial grammar.
Exactly. Reflecting the total possibility within that field, life isn't an accident in this view. It's a necessary function of the FCHP. It's the coherence field trying to, fully express itself.
So to describe this, living reality, UCT uses Finsler coherence geometry, not standard Riemannian geometry. Why the switch? Why Finsler?
Good question. Because Riemannian geometry, the bedrock of GR, assumes space is isotropic, meaning distance between 2 points is the same no matter which way you go or how fast. It's kind of static.
Okay.
Finsler geometry is different. It's called a living geometry because the metric, how you measure distance and curvature, actually depends on your state, on your direction of motion.
It sounds immediately biological, like intrinsically dynamic.
It has to be, right? Biology is fundamentally anisotropic. Think about a cell membrane, how stuff moves across it, how signals flow. It's highly directional. It depends on the cell's energy state, its environment. Finsler geometry mathematically captures that kind of dynamic adaptation.
It builds the asymmetry needed for life right into the math of space itself.
Precisely. It embeds that relational dependence. So, okay, if we accept this Finsler structure for the FCHP, how does UCT break it down geometrically? You mentioned the coherence tensor.
Right, the coherence tensor. What's its job?
That's the rule setter. It defines the invariant relationships, the fundamental mathematical constraints that keep things stable, keep structures intact across all scales. It's like the geometric definition of harmony that has to be maintained for anything, an atom or an organism, to hold together.
Non-negotiables.
Okay.
Then there's a hyperfractal topology. You said this is more than just the self-similarity we see in, like, ferns or coastlines. What does the hyper part mean?
The hyper suggests complexity beyond just geometric scaling. A standard fractal repeats its pattern at smaller sizes. A hyperfractal topology implies this organizational pattern is conserved not just across scales micro to macro, but potentially across dimensions.
Across dimensions, whoa.
Yeah. It encodes recursion, inheritance, the idea that the blueprint of the whole is somehow present in every part. And this topology is the mechanism for that information to replicate itself, maybe even across dimensional boundaries.
So it's not just that things look like fractals. It's that the universe organizes itself using hyperfractal logic, which allows the same solutions, spirals, branches to pop up in neurons, DNA, and galaxies.
Exactly. It's the deep structure for how information is conserved and replicated. And then finally, there's the active part, phase dynamics.
Okay, this is the doing part, how the geometry actually makes things happen.
Pretty much. Phase dynamics is what orchestrates morphogenesis, the actual development of form. It does this through resonance modulation. Think of it like tuning a radio. The FCHP has many potential phase starts.
Like frequencies.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
To get a stable biological form, the system has to tune these phase states, modulate the resonance, until it finds a configuration that's both low energy and highly coherent. It's this dynamic process that turns the underlying coherence fields into curvature, resonance, physical form, even metabolism, all at once.
A continuous feedback loop, keeping life going.
That's the idea. It's the engine converting coherence into reality.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From pure geometry to linguistics, UCT uses this really powerful analogy, a universal linguistic architecture. The claim is pretty bold. All living systems follow a specific language structure. Coherence is literally writing itself into form. Let's unpack the parts of this language.
Yeah, the analogy is really helpful, I think. It helps us grasp function, not just mechanism. The FCHP itself acts as this underlying linguistic substrate. And the core of this language system is the grammar.
Grammar. So the fundamental rules, the unbreakable laws like quantum physics rules, or the basic requirements for a cell to even exist, the invariants.
Exactly. If the universe speaks, coherency, as grammar is the absolute set of rules. You can't violate them. It ensures basic stability. Then comes syntax. This is where structure starts to build meaning.
Syntax, the ordering of things, like words in a sentence. Where do we see that in biology?
The source material gives specific examples. DNA transcription, the sequence of bases being read, that's pure syntax, neural signaling patterns too. It's the organized pathway that information has to follow to create a meaningful result. The quality of the syntax affects how complex or efficient the organism is.
Okay, grammar is the rules, syntax is the ordering. Then we get to semantics. This sounds like where the real intelligence comes in.
Right. This is the biosemantic field. And yeah, it's maybe the most philosophically heavy part. Semantics is about interpreting the resonance. It's where intelligence and function emerge. This is where adaptation happens, evolution, consciousness itself.
So the system takes the syntax, the ordered information interprets its coherent pattern, and generates meaning, like functional output.
Exactly. And if a system fails to interpret that coherence properly, well, that's disease or dysfunction or just isn't viable. The FCHP, through this whole linguistic structure, is supposed to unify form, morphogenesis, energy, metabolism, and meaning, consciousness.
That raises a big question, though. If coherence is the language and meaning comes from interpreting it, what about things like randomness, decay, death? Are those just grammatical errors in the cosmic language?
That's a really interesting way to put it. UCT seems to view death and decay more like localized decoherence, a temporary loss of that linguistic structure. It's not that the universal grammar is wrong, but the local system, the organism, couldn't maintain the required coherence tensor against, entropy.
So the local expression ends, the word fades out.
And the coherence just flows back into the wider Panspacial field. It's termination, not fundamental error.
Okay, now this is where the really specific math comes in, resonance isomorphism. This claim is just stunning, that the exact same coherence equations show up at totally different scales, tying everything together mathematically.
Resonance isomorphism is maybe the linchpin evidence for this whole universal language idea. It says there's a conservation of coherence ratios. The specific mathematical ratio needed to keep things coherent at the quantum level is somehow the same ratio needed for coherence at the biological level, or even the cosmic level.
Like a musical chord, you said.
Yeah.
Played in different octaves.
Exactly like that. The relationship, the ratio, is preserved.
And the sources gave those wild examples. Electron spin harmonics, protein folding, and neural synchronization. Can we dig into the protein folding one versus electron spin? That comparison feels particularly striking.
Absolutely. So protein folding, it's a massive biological challenge, right? This long chain of amino acids has to snap into a very specific 3D shape to function. And it has to do it incredibly fast.
Milliseconds, yeah.
So UCT claims that the specific coherence ratio, the mathematical relationship required to minimize the energy of that folding process and find the stable, functional shape, is mathematically identical to the coherence ratio needed to maintain a stable, organized pattern of electron spins in an atom.
Hold on. So the rule for organizing quantum particles inside an atom is the same rule for shaping a complex biological molecule. How does UCT even explain how that rule is conserved across such different domains? Quantum physics versus, molecular thermodynamics.
The explanation hinges on information conservation within this FCHP structure. Both processes, electron spin stability and protein folding, are seen as the local system trying to achieve maximum coherence with the minimum energy cost. Resonance isomorphism is presented as the universal principle of efficiency.
Efficiency.
Yeah, that specific mathematical ratio defines the most efficient way for information, whether it's quantum state information or folding pathway information, to transition from a less ordered state to a highly coherent, stable, functional one. It suggests that information optimization might be the truly universal physical law here.
So that linguistic continuity, the ability to basically translate quantum efficiency directly into biological shapes and functions, that's what makes life intelligent in this model. Lets systems talk across scales.
Precisely. And we supposedly see this translation happening inside the cell. This Panspacial language isn't just abstract. It shows up in the cell's bioelectric code, the voltage patterns across membranes.
Okay.
In the way water molecules organize themselves coherently inside the cell, quantum water coherence, and even in the microtubular resonance networks, the cell's internal scaffolding.
Yeah, the cytoskeleton components.
UCT calls those the syntax trees of living structure. They're seen as the conduits actively processing and translating this FCHP information.
We have to touch on DNA here, because focusing on detail means addressing how UCT really downplays DNA's role compared to standard biology. Biology puts DNA front and center. Lillian seems to demote it.
Significantly, yes. UCT argues that focusing only on DNA is like trying to understand Shakespeare by analyzing the font he used. DNA is just the written alphabet. It holds the sequence, the linear data. Important, yes, but FCHP is the language it's written in.
The grammar, the syntax, the meaning.
Exactly. FCHP dictates the rules, grammar, for what sequences are even possible or stable, how they get read and used, syntax, and how they ultimately generate function and meaning, semantics. Without the FCHP field providing that context, UCT argues DNA is just inert data, a passive library waiting for the coherence field to give it life.
Okay. To help visualize all this, UCT uses a schematic. 5 concentric bands showing how this FCHP grammar scales up. Can we walk through those layers?
Sure, it starts right at the center. Layer 1, the quantum coherence layer. This is the absolute seed grammar, the pure, unchanging rules of FCHP before they get reduced into matter or form.
The raw potential. Then moving out, layer 2, the molecular resonance layer.
Right. Here's where syntax starts forming. Those fundamental quantum rules get applied to molecules, how they arrange themselves, how they interact coherently. This layer governs things like protein folding, chemical bonds, self-assembly.
Building blocks begin to follow the rules. Then layer 3 feels like where life really kicks in, the cellular intelligence layer.
This is called the zone of semantic structuring, where meaning and function get organized. Complex systems emerge here. Membrane potentials, coordinating things, gene expression being modulated, those bioelectric codes directing activity. Information starts having a purpose.
Then layer 4, where we perceive ourselves, the organismic consciousness layer.
UCT defines this as the layer of recursive translation. The organism as a whole is constantly translating signals from the lower layers, integrating them, and projecting them outward as behavior, awareness, complex feedback loops. Consciousness, in this view, is the system's ability to model the coherence field internally, recursively.
Self-awareness as a reflection of the field. And finally, layer 5, the biggest picture, the cosmic coherence layer.
This wraps around everything. It represents the total panspatial articulation. The largest structures we see, galactic filaments, clusters, voids, are seen as the grandest, slowest expressions of the exact same underlying coherence grammar.
And the key is that all these layers are connected.
Yeah, the schematic emphasizes resonance pathways connecting them all, showing the continuity of FCHP across every conceivable scale, reinforcing that idea that somehow your consciousness is geometrically linked to how galaxy spins. It's quite a picture.
Okay, this brings us to maybe the most nuts and bolts part of UCT, the coherence genesis chain, or the reductive cascade, they call it. This sounds like the actual step-by-step process for how pure geometry, pure coherence, supposedly turns into actual discrete living biology.
Exactly. It's the proposed mechanism, how continuous symmetry gets broken down sequentially to create discrete biological forms. It's UCT's answer to how does geometry literally become biology?
And the chain is explicit. Coherence leads to curvature, which leads to torsion, which leads to chirality, which finally results in life.
That's the sequence. Coherence, right arrow, curvature, torsion, right arrow, chirality, right arrow, life. We really should spend a moment on each step, each inflection point.
Agreed. Stage 1 is curvature. How does that initial fold happen? How does the smooth coherence field first generate form?
Curvature is the first bend, the first inflection. Imagine the FCHP, the panspatial field, as this perfectly smooth, flat sheet of potential. To make anything local, anything distinct, that sheet has to fold or curve.
Okay.
That folding creates differences in tension, or what UCT calls gradients of coherence density. Mathematically, that gradient is curvature, where the field gets denser, space folds inward, creating attractors like little potential wells.
And there's a formalism for this? Math-Geller.
Right. It basically says that the gradient, the change in the phase fields, generates the curvature tensor. And biologically, this isn't just abstract math. It's meant to correspond directly to the morphogenetic fields that guide embryonic development, or set up a cell's polarity.
So curvature creates the potential shape. The blueprint gives birth to form, as the schematic labels it, potential.
Exactly. Potential form. But form isn't enough for life, right? Life needs movement, dynamism. That brings us to stage 2, torsion. How does static potential become dynamic?
Yeah, how does motion get introduced?
Torsion emerges when those curvature gradients get too steep. They exceed some kind of coherence equilibrium threshold. The system can't just keep folding linearly. It becomes unstable. So it resolves that tension by twisting, by rotating.
Rotational instability.
Yeah, the field twists on itself. This torsion acts like a rotational operator. They use the symbol tau, and that's what introduces directionality, spin, dynamism into the system.
And Lillian says torsion gives birth to time. Why time? That's a huge claim.
It's a deep geometric connection they're making. Mathematically, torsion introduces irreversibility. Think about it. Curvature is generally reversible. You can trace a curved path forward and backward, but torsion adds a twist, a rotation. Like stirring coffee, you can't perfectly unstir it by just reversing the motion.
Ah, okay. Irreversibility.
That irreversibility, that necessary forward flow, is argued to be the geometric basis for the arrow of time we experience in biology. And biologically, torsion manifests as energetic circulation, the constant flow needed for metabolism, for homeostasis. It's coherence learning to rotate, labeled motion.
So torsion is like the geometric mandate for constant energy flow to maintain coherence, the cost of living, geometrically speaking. And this involves curvature-torsion coupling. The folding turns into spinning.
Precisely. The static potential, curvature, acquires necessary internal motion, torsion.
Okay, curvature is potential, torsion is motion. Finally, stage 3, chirality. This is where it crystallizes into actual life through something called chiral condensation.
Yeah, this is the stabilization point. Chirality is when that dynamic, maybe high-energy torsion settles down. It condenses into a stable, enduring topological form, specifically one with handedness.
Handedness, like left-handed or right-handed molecules.
Exactly. It's the fixed-point solution of that torsional resonance. The spinning energy, torsion, stabilizes into a fixed polarity, a fixed asymmetry, chirality.
The math for this is given as partial tau right arrow quad sheet texine, which looks like when the rate of change of torsion hits 0 at some critical time, you get a fixed chiral sign.
That's the idea. The dynamic rotation locks into a stable, asymmetric state, and that stabilization, that emergence of fixed-handedness, is presented as the critical bridge between pure geometry and actual biological life. It gives birth to identity.
And this explains why biology consistently uses, say, L-amino acids and D-sugars, and the right-handed twists of DNA. It's not chance, it's a geometric necessity from this FCHP cascade.
That's the argument. This preference for a specific handedness is a fundamental geometric rule imposed by the FCHP. It provides an absolute internal reference frame, which UCT argues is crucial for building complex, self-referential systems like conscious beings.
And this specific geometric outcome, chirality, is also seen at the cosmic scale.
Yes, they draw that parallel strongly. The same kind of fixed-point stabilization that supposedly dictates your DNA's helicity is echoed in the rotational patterns of spiral galaxies, or in certain electromagnetic couplings observed in cosmology. So those 3 steps, curvature potential, torsion, motion, chirality, identity, form the sequence. The way the universe allegedly reduces perfect symmetry down to the specific, asymmetric, stable forms needed for life.
All right, let's pull back and look at the really big picture implications here. If this FCHP framework, this whole geometric cascade, is actually correct, well, it changes everything about how we view existence itself. The first major consequence they talk about is the pan-vital universe.
Right. If the FCHP field is truly panspatial everywhere across all potential dimensions, then logically, the theory argues, it must also be pan-vital. Life isn't some fluke, some lucky chemical accident on a wet rock. It's the default language of existence, a fundamental property of coherence, necessary for the cosmos to even express itself.
Okay, but pan-vital, everything is alive. What's the difference then between me sitting here and, I don't know, this desk, or a rock? If everything is inherently vital.
That's a key distinction they make. It's about the degree of coherence and modulation. UCT would view things like rocks or dust clouds as very low-frequency, low-coherence expressions of the FCHP. They still follow the basic grammar, but they exhibit minimal syntax, almost no semantic capability.
They're like simple static words in the language.
Something like that. Biological systems, on the other hand, especially complex ones like us, are viewed as high-fidelity coherence engines. Our main function in this model is to actively sustain, modulate, and process FCHP flow. We're constantly negotiating coherence versus decoherence within spacetime. We're localized, high-resolution expressions of that panspatial grammar.
But we're not just made of the language, we're actively speaking it with high complexity.
You could put it that way. Which leads to the next big idea, cosmic self-articulation. If biology, consciousness, and cosmology are all just different expressions of the same underlying coherence grammar,
then they're all unified.
Unified, yes. The universe isn't just stuff happening randomly. It's presented as a self-referential system that is, and this is a direct quote essentially, learning to pronounce itself through form. Life and consciousness aren't side effects. They're the universe's own advanced tools for self-expression, for recursively translating and interpreting its own fundamental grammar.
And this is where Lillian explicitly connects this very modern, very technical theory back to ancient philosophy, right?
He does. He draws a direct line between the FCHP, this living, organizing syntax of reality, and the ancient Greek concept of the logos.
The logos, divine reason, cosmic order.
Exactly, the principle that structures everything. UCT is positioned as providing a rigorous, geometric, mathematical basis for that ancient intuition. The universe is ordered, and that order is quantifiable coherence.
Okay, now there's one more piece we need to bring in, Philly. We touched on it, but it's crucial. The resymmetrization pathway. We spent section 3 talking about the reductive cascade geometry breaking symmetry down into life, but the sources say that's only half the picture.
Right. The reductive cascade is the birth pathway. Going from high symmetry, the pure FCHP field, down to lower discrete symmetry, chirality, biological forms. The resymmetrization pathway is presented as the ascending arrow. It suggests life has the potential to move back towards higher coherence, higher symmetry.
Well, through what mechanism?
Through evolution, complexity, and especially intentional awareness, consciousness.
So if life began by breaking symmetry, conscious life evolves by rebuilding it. How does that work practically?
Well, the idea is that conscious systems, through their complexity and their ability to operate at the semantic level, intelligence, gain the capacity to intentionally engage with that universal grammar. Think about high coherence brain states like deep meditation or flow states.
Okay.
UCT might frame those not just as results of FCHP dynamics, but as active mechanisms where the local system, the brain, is increasing coherence flow, potentially even influencing the surrounding panspatial field in a subtle way. Evolution, then, isn't just random mutation and selection. It's driven by a deeper geometric imperative towards states of maximum coherence efficiency, reducing internal friction, increasing internal symmetry.
Wow. So the universe makes us by breaking symmetry, and maybe our purpose, our evolutionary trajectory, is to consciously put that symmetry back together. That puts consciousness right at the center of the cosmic equation.
That seems to be the implication. The reductive cascade describes creation. The resymmetrization pathway, perhaps, describes destiny or potential. It suggests the path forward for life, especially conscious life, is fundamentally geometric. Achieving higher levels of unified awareness translates directly into higher degrees of coherence and symmetry within the FCHP framework. Hashtag outro phone.
Well, this deep dive into unified coherence theory has certainly given us, and hopefully you, a lot to think about. It's one of the most detailed geometric explanations for life's existence we've ever come across. I think the key takeaway, the big shift for you, the listener, has to be that ontological flip we started with.
Yeah, moving away from thinking of space as a passive box that happens to contain life.
Right. To a model where life defined as coherence actively generates space through curvature.
Generates time through torsion.
It generates identity through plurality.
It's a really powerful synthesis. UCT attempts to provide actual mathematical formalism, specific tensors, ratios, dynamics for ideas that often stay in the realm of philosophy or speculation. It tries to ground why structures repeat across scales, from the quantum to the cosmic, because they all have to follow the same underlying rules of coherence conservation.
And because we explored that other half of the story, the resymmetrization pathway, life potentially moving back towards greater coherence, it leaves us with a pretty profound implication, doesn't it?
It really does. The theory doesn't just describe you as a product of this coherence field. It suggests you as a conscious being or an active participant. An intelligent coherence engine, capable of actually modulating this field, maybe even increasing its coherence locally through your own awareness and intention.
So if every conscious thought, every moment of insider connection potentially contributes to the overall symmetry, the overall coherence of the entire system.
Then the final really provocative thought UCT leaves us wrestling with is this. If you accept your role, even hypothetically, as a coherence engine within this vast panspatial field, what new grammar, what new possibilities might you write by intentionally engaging with this deep language of existence?